Joining us now is George Ogilvie, President and CEO of Arizona Sonoran Copper. Great to see you, sir.
Hey, thank you, Mark.
So tell us about this project. You have the Cactus Project because, as you point out, this is a brown field, not a green field. It's not going to take 10 to 15 years to get into production. So give us a brief overview.
Well, it was a former producing mine in the 70s and 80s that was owned by ASARCO. It was a big copper porphyry, and at that time it was open pittable. And unfortunately, ASARCO filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2004. The asset fell into a state trust that was managed by the Arizona Department of Environment and Quality, and my predecessors were able to purchase it from the trust in late 2019 for $6 million US. So over the last 2.5 years, we've been drilling on the property, de-risking it. We now have 6.5 billion pounds of contained copper in the ground. We put out a very robust PEA in August of 2021, and we're now embarked on a pre-feasibility study that'll come out in the second half of 2023. And of course, just recently we announced a big discovery at a deposit called Park Salyer, which added approximately 3 billion pounds to that global resource. And the nice thing about the project is because it's a former producing mine, it has some infrastructure. So the main power line runs right through the property. We have access to water. There's an abundance of water in the area. We've already secured our water permits for the next 50 years. And importantly, it's all on private land with no federal nexus. So we're only dealing with the local state and the municipal authorities, meaning, as you pointed out, timelines to first production are relatively quick.
And Park Salyer doubled the size of the resource, correct? And you've talked about some of the drilling results. It's spectacular.
Yeah, so in the maiden resource we put out, Park Salyer is an inferred resource. It's drilled off on 500-foot centres. As far as the leachable material is concerned, which is an oxide and an enriched sulfide, which is chalcocite and covalite here, we've got 115 million tonnes of rock in the ground at 1.06 total soluble copper for 2.5 billion pounds of leachable copper in the ground. And above that, we have about 28 million tonnes of primary sulfide chalcopyrite in and around about a 0.8% copper for another 450 million pounds of copper. So we believe this is going to be quite material, and hence the reason why we decided to rescope our PFS and delay it until the second quarter or the second half of 2023.
Right, so pre-feasibility study next year, then a definitive one, then construction and production by 25. That's the plan?
Yeah, exactly. So once we finish the PFS second half of next year, we move straight into bankable. That'll be done by the summer of 2024. Assuming the project financing is in place at that point in time, we would anticipate a 12 to 18 month construction and development period, which means at the back end of 2025, we'd see first production coming out from the site, which is a heap leach with a solvent extraction electrowinning, meaning that we'll be producing copper cathode, putting it right into the market.
Now, Rio Tinto owns 7% of your company, and you're also trialing, testing their heap technology. Tell us about that.
Yep, so they approached us in January of this year. They've been experimenting in-house with this Newton technology, as they call it, which is the heap leaching of a primary sulfide, in this case chalcopyrite. They were looking for a project that had significant resources of chalcopyrite, but essentially was a stranded resource, meaning that the company was getting no value for it, and therefore the shareholders were getting no value for it. And they felt that this project, given it was in Arizona, it would get fully permitted, it would go to commercial production. This would be a good test for them to take the technology all the way through to full commercial application. And if it were successful, they could then go to other companies, particularly in the copper space, and try and see if they could reach commercial agreements to deploy this technology within the wider sector.
Now, in terms of power and renewables, Arizona seems quite progressive. They're transitioning to renewables. Is there potential for your project to be 100% renewable power?
Absolutely. So the main power line from the Arizona State Power Service Provider runs right through the property. It's a 115,000 kVA line, And if we wanted to, we can get 100% green energy from that power line. A lot of the power in Arizona is generated from a nuclear reactor and obviously from photoelectric cells. Recently, in the last year, we conducted what's known as also a life cycle analysis, which essentially was from cradle to gate, scope 1, scope 2, and also scope 3 on our greenhouse gas emissions. And with no action plans in place, we were seeing anywhere between 5.5 to 8.5 kilograms of CO2 emissions per kilogram of copper produced. With about a dozen action plans implemented, we can actually take that down to under 1.5 kilograms of CO2 emissions per kilogram of copper produced. So of course then we would also look then at maybe some carbon trading credits, and subsequently we get down to net zero carbon emissions.
Sounds great, and it sounds like you're very nicely positioned in the copper market.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, obviously we're heading into a little bit of a slowdown here. Copper is a bellwether, obviously, for the economy, but I think if you take more of a medium and longer term view and you look at the supply and demand fundamentals,
right,
as the world looks to decarbonize and move to green energy, copper is going to be absolutely critical to that success. And we know there just isn't enough copper in the world. And the only way to bring that online is to incentivize it through pricing. And this is one of the few near-term copper producers out there that's in a very safe jurisdiction and can make it into commercial production in a very short period of time and take advantage of the beginnings of what I believe is going to be a multi-generational bull cycle in certain of those commodities.
Great stuff, George. Thanks for the information.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, George Ogilvie, President and CEO at Arizona Sonoran Copper.